Section 2, still at the surgery. Act 11, Scene 4. That was it, wait and see. It felt so anticlimactic to sit all day expecting an outcome, only to find that it was time to go home and wait some more. People trickled out of the waiting room at different times. Some of the adults left first, probably because they're more accustomed to being patient. Miss Kelsey and Mrs. Warner left, then some of my classmates. Only a few people were still sitting, Anna and Terry, and Danielle and her mother. When Mom and I rallied ourselves to leave, Lexi and Jeffrey came with us. We were their ride home. Wait and see. Anna. The waiting room slowly emptied. Next thing I knew, my mom and I were sitting directly across from Danielle and her mother, with hardly anyone else around. I felt uneasy, knowing her mother hated us, but I took a chance. Danielle, can we pray with you? I asked. Danielle didn't hesitate 1 second. Sure, she said. We bowed our heads, and Danielle led us in a prayer for Mr. Terupt. It was a beautiful prayer, and afterward I thought her mother's eyes looked differently upon me. Mom and I left after that, leaving Danielle and her mother, Luke and his mother, Peter, Mrs. Williams, and Miss Newberry. How close were Mr. Terupt and Miss Newberry, both without wedding rings? I didn't know, but my heart suddenly hurt for the teacher from across the hall. She was definitely hoping to have him back. You didn't even need to be good at noticing things to see that. So many of us need you, Mr. Terupt. Keep fighting. Danielle. Can we pray with you? Anna asked me. I felt alarm rush through my mom's body. How could these sinners want to pray with us? Mom must have wondered. Sure, I said. Dear God, we're down here playing the wait-and-see game now. It'd be great if you could keep the waiting part short and give us back Mr. Terupt. There are lots of people hoping he wakes up. Please give us the strength to keep hoping and believing as we go on waiting. And God, I whispered this last part because Peter was sitting near us, I also ask that you give extra comfort to Peter and Jeffrey, who, too, though I'm not sure what's up with him. Amen. Anna's smart. She wants our families to get along, so she asked to pray together, knowing that God is most important to my family. I know my mom can't think Terry's all bad if she's praying with us, and Anna is as nice and sweet as she is. At least I hope that's true. I've been asking God to help me get my family to see that Terry and Anna are good people. Jessica. Act 11, Scene 5. We dropped Lexi off first, then Jeffrey. I sat in the front passenger seat and Jeffrey sat in the back. Before he got out, I asked him, You okay, Jeffrey? Yeah, I'm okay, he said. Thanks for helping me in there. Thanks, Miss Whiteman. You're welcome, we said together. I'm sure everybody's wondering what's up with me, he said. Don't worry. Your secret is still safe, I said. Jeffrey opened the back door, but he didn't get out right away. There's something I've been meaning to tell you, Jess. What happened to Terupt isn't your fault. You need to stop thinking that it is. Jeffrey's words startled me. I did feel guilty. I'd roped Danielle and Anna into my wicked plan, which led to Peter's devastating snowball. Then why did it happen, Jeffrey? I said. I told you things happen for a reason, and I still don't know mine. Neither do I, he said. But not knowing the reason doesn't make it your fault. We sat quietly. Mom didn't say anything, and I stared down at my hands. They looked for a book to hold. I fidgeted with my nails and cuticles instead. Then Jeffrey spoke again. I know one thing, Jess. He had called me Jess twice now. You've helped me. I haven't had someone to talk to in a long time. Thanks. He climbed out of our car and shut the door. Before driving away, we saw Jeffrey's mom standing at the front door to his house waiting for him, and she wasn't wearing pajamas. And they hugged. Mom and I had tears in our eyes as we drove away. More of Mr. Terupt at work. I just knew it. We hadn't driven very far before Mom broke the silence. Jessica, I need to tell you some things that even adults have a hard time understanding, but I need you to try, okay? I nodded and sat up straight in my seat to readjust my seatbelt. I know you've been wrestling with the issue of whose fault Mr. Terupt's accident is, as many of your classmates. Poor Peter's really struggling, and I'm afraid the only one that might help him is Mr. Terupt. Mom slowed to the stop sign and looked both ways. So whose fault is it? I asked, my voice rising. Emotion can do that to you, Mom. Mom just went with the flow. She turned the car left and stepped on the accelerator. Mr. Terupt, she said. I looked out my window. I didn't want to hear it. Look, Jessica, you don't have to agree with me, and not everyone will, But you need to hear me out. Let me explain. Slowly, reluctantly, I looked at her. I didn't want her to be right. Thank you, she said. I told you it wasn't going to be easy. We slowed at a red light. All those instances with Peter earlier on this year, and with Luke's plant concoction, and all the other mischief. Mum paused. I think Mr. Terupt handled him the way he did because he was trying to teach you guys some personal responsibility. The light turned and Mum pushed the gas. But that's what cost him in the end. He let you play rough that day in the snow and hoped you wouldn't cross the line. But he made it your responsibility not to cross that line because he didn't intervene. But how is that bad? Isn't that the one of the reasons he was so special, because he gave us those chances? Don't use the past tense, honey. He is special. Fine, I said, annoyed, but glad to talk about him in the present. But isn't it? I was annoyed because I didn't want the conversation slowed. I wanted answers. I cracked my window, suddenly hot. I let the wind hit my face. It is indeed one of the reasons he's special, but in the end, you're still just kids, and asking you to assume that much responsibility isn't fair. You can't be expected to handle it all the time, so that's why it's his fault. Mum spoke so calmly. I knew she was trying to keep me from getting too upset. It's his fault for asking us to act like adults when we're just kids, I said, restating Mum's argument. Whereas, if he had taken the responsibility out of our hands by making us stop playing rough, then there probably never would have been a snowball thrown. I looked at Mum. That's right exactly, she said. Well, I think that makes about as much sense as Dad and his airheaded bimbo. Our car swerved. Mum was in shock. We hadn't spoken about Dad in a while, but he and his stupid girlfriend boiled to the surface of my upset feelings. Plus, I have a strong vocabulary, and could have probably selected a nicer word for her, though I doubt I could have chosen a more accurate one. So now, if Mr. Terupt gets better, he's going to get in trouble. Is that right, too? Not necessarily, Mum said. And watch your language. Besides, to say airheaded and bimbo is a bit redundant. Though I'll agree the new woman in your dad's life is a real floozy. The car slowed and Mum pulled into our driveway. She put the car in park and turned it off. I undid my seatbelt. Jessica, I've spoken to Mrs. Williams and to some of the other parents and adults at school on several different occasions. We've been talking because we're worried about how you're all dealing with this. Nobody wants to see Mr. Terupt get in trouble, including Mrs. Williams and the school. Everyone knows he's a great teacher. We all just want him to get better. Mum leaned over and gave me a hug. I hugged her back. You know, Terry told me the other day that Anna asked her if their situation is her fault. Anna's fault, I said. Of course it isn't. Exactly, Mum said. And I hope you know what happened between your father and me is not at all your fault either. I needed to hear that. I hugged her again, but I didn't say anything because talking would have made me cry. And Mum was quiet too, I think for the same reason. Quiet love filled our car. June. Jessica. Final act, scene 1. Welcome to the last day of school where there's music and movies and games, singing and laughing and smiles all around. Cakes and cookies and fun for everyone. At least this is what the last day of school is supposed to encompass. Ours didn't. Crying wasn't anything I had ever experienced on any last day of school, but crying was what I felt like doing, and I know I wasn't the only one. We had held tremendous hope for our teacher to be with us by the end of the school year, but he wasn't. I kept wondering about the Mr. Terupt I don't know. I've thought a lot about it since the day in the waiting room. Everyone likes Mr. Terupt, but nobody is that close to him, except for Miss Newberry, but even she hopes to get closer. Part of me thinks that it's not just him. They're all concerned about us, too, because they know we're the ones who are really close to him. But how can I even say that or think that when I don't truly know him? Maybe it's because it doesn't matter how well we know him. We love him. I haven't talked to anyone else about this, not even my mom. I want to, but what's the point? He's not here. Mr. Terupt didn't make it. I went to see Teach last week, and like the nurses said, they were doing something and that I had to come back. I was mad, but I didn't really think anything was up. Now I'm beginning to wonder if maybe something's going on. Mrs. Williams and Miss Newberry are definitely acting strange. Like Mrs. Williams is way too perky, humming to herself and talking with silent nods to Miss Newberry, who's been poking her head into our room one too many times today. I'm beginning to wonder if Teach woke up, and like they've been keeping it a secret so that they can surprise us. I'm telling you, something's up. Danielle, dear God, I don't want to be mad at you, but I am. You haven't listened to my prayers. If you had, Mr. Terupt would be here. We need him. Why didn't you give him back to us? Anna, Mrs. Williams makes me mad. Our whole class is feeling terrible except for her. She seems happy, walking around with that bounce in her step. I even heard her humming at one point, but she quickly stopped when she realized I had noticed. Is it really that happy to get this year over with? Then the thought hit me. Does she know something that we don't?